Hello, this is Diary of a Speaker. This is a podcast where we get to talk about the speaking world, the art of public speaking, and also the business of public speaking. We are in our first few episodes, and we've had some wonderful guests come and just share with us their stories of how they became speakers, how they've grown, and what they are doing currently. And we have been inspired, and we've also got some ideas, tips, and strategies to go about the speaking business and the art of speaking. Today, we have a special guest with us. His name is Peter George. A few of speakers that have been around me might have seen Peter George with us. But for those of you who haven't seen Peter George, you appreciate watching this episode. And now, let me welcome Peter George. He's going to introduce himself and then we'll get going. Yes, Diary of a Speaker. And please remember to go to www.diaryofaSpeaker.com and subscribe to our newsletter as well as this podcast to watch the previous ones and also receive the future podcast episodes. Thank you. Let's go and meet Peter George. Hi, Peter.
Hey, Anthony, how are you?
I'm fine. How are you?
Very good, thank you.
Yeah, wonderful. Welcome to Diary of a Speaker.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yes, we are honored to have you here, and we know that we are going to have a great time. Yeah, some of my speakers that we've been working together have seen you before, but I am sure there are people who have not seen you anywhere before. So maybe we can have the honor of getting to know who is Peter George.
Well, I've been a speaker for 37 years now, so quite a while. I've
Yeah.
enjoyed every minute of it. And I've also been training other speakers for the last 19 years, whether they're professional speakers or executives who go out and speak, attorneys, and others as well, other professionals. And I get as much joy out of helping other speakers as I do speaking myself. But my
Okay.
life is tied up in speaking. And I'm from the US, specifically Rhode Island, which is the smallest state. It's extremely small. And for those of you around the world who don't know where Rhode Island is in the US, we're up in the northeast corner, halfway, well, between Boston and New York City.
That's beautiful. Now, in this podcast, we are talking specifically about speaking, and now hearing that you are only dealing with speaking, this is what you've been doing for as many years as you have shared with us. We are glad, we are honored to have you who has experience to come and share that some of that experience with us. Let me ask you, because we are always curious, those people who are not into speaking, yes, and also those who are already starting to get into speaking. How did you get into speaking in the first place?
It's nothing I ever intentionally thought I would be doing.
Mm-hmm.
When I was a kid, I had a lisp and a stutter. So
Okay.
the last thing I ever wanted to do was speak to people.
Mm-hmm.
I learned to keep my mouth shut.
Yeah.
And it wasn't till I got into the corporate world when I got out of school that I learned that I had to, in fact, speak to people.
Mm-hmm.
And I went for training, and
Yes.
it was group training, and it was awesome.
Mm-hmm.
But then I went for private training. And actually,
Okay.
before either of those, I tried on my own. And we're going back to the age of cassette tapes.
Yeah.
I listened to cassettes in my office, I listened to cassettes in my car, trying to get better and better at it. But once I started to get help with someone, group training and then individual training, it made a world of difference.
Mm-hmm.
And then I left the corporate world, started my own company. And when I started that company, I was asked to go out and speak
Mm-hmm.
about the industry. We started from nothing and we were doing very well in the industry. So it was the publishing industry. And my wife, who was my business partner also, is an accountant. And it
Mm-hmm.
didn't take her long to see that every time I went and spoke, we got a bump in revenue.
Okay.
So she looked at me one day and said, "Keep doing that and do more of it."
Mm-hmm.
So I tried to speak as often as I could, knowing that would increase our revenue. And I spoke more and more. And then companies were coming to me asking me to speak on their behalf within the industry. And it just kind of rolled from there. And when we sold that company, uh, this is what I've been doing since.
Mm. Speaking increases your revenue. That's a good one.
Yeah, well, you get out and get exposure, and there will be people who say, for one reason or another, he resonates with me
Mm-hmm.
and I want to do business with him or her, depending on who's speaking. But in my case, he resonates with me. I want to do business with him. You get added exposure, you make that connection. No different than a singer or a band out on the
Mm-hmm.
road and they're playing gigs, and people say, I want to buy their music.
Yeah.
It's the very same thing. And you get that exposure. And as long as you do well, it's good exposure.
Mm-hmm.
And that helps revenue.
That's good. So get more exposure. If you're there, you're beginning, you're thinking of getting started into speaking, exposure is a word that you may be carrying around. You be reminding yourself every now and then, exposure, exposure, exposure.
Yeah, as long as it's good exposure.
A good exposure.
There are some people who go out and they're not really ready to speak yet,
Mm-hmm.
and they're hoping to get exposure, positive exposure from that. I believe in speaking as much as you can. The
Yeah.
more you speak, the more you'll speak. And but you also have to get better at it.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't be a beginner forever and just say, well, as long as I get out there and speak and I have the guts to do that, then I'll be fine.
Uh-huh.
Now, that might be good in the beginning. It might be good in smaller instances, but as you get in front of larger audiences and audiences that make more of a difference, you also have to be getting better at it as you go.
Yeah. Improve as you go.
Yeah.
Get
And improve in
excited.
their eyes, the
Get
listeners' eyes.
yes.
Yours as well, but especially the listeners' eyes.
Especially the listeners' eyes, because this is the reason that we get there up on the stage is because of the audience, because of
It's
the
all
person
about
that
them.
will listen. Now, you mentioned the cassette tapes. I happen to have got a bit of experience of it. I know you've been there before I was, but then I got a little experience. So, and I'm curious, by that time that you were starting, who could have been your greatest inspiration in speaking? I mean, you listened to that and you wear out a cassette tape, this trying to listen to them.
The people who meant a lot to me as speakers uh, go back as far as Winston Churchill,
Mm-hmm.
uh, and then more current than that, but still a long way back now. John F. Kennedy was a great speaker. Martin Luther King was a great speaker. And then there were people that I can't remember their names, and most people have never heard of them, who had a great influence too, because I would listen to them, and I might only have one chance to listen to them. Might have been a live opportunity to listen to them, and they did things in a certain way that I would pick up on and say, "Oh, I'd love to emulate that. I love
Mm-hmm.
how they did that. The way they engaged the audience, the way they followed up with the audience, whatever it might have been."
Mm-hmm.
So there's that as well, where it was just a one-off, and I never got to hear them speak again, but they still influenced me.
Well, that's cool. And now we've mentioned about two things there: getting started and getting exposure, and improving on the go. And we have listeners who have never done anything in the public world, in the public speaking world, but they are desiring to get started and they are desiring to grow, to become great speakers, maybe international speakers. And you could give them an idea of how to get started and get going, in addition to what we've already shared about getting started, exposure, and keep growing. Maybe there are some other bits in there that you could add up so that they have an idea of how do I get started, how do I grow and become a great speaker?
Places to speak can include business communities, civic communities, and organizations, depending on what you speak on.
Mm,
But, here in the US, we have chambers of commerce. I'm sure other countries do as well. We have Rotary and other organizations that are community and civic slash business uh, focused. And again, depending on what you speak on, you can seek out these organizations, and a lot of them are looking for speakers.
mm,
Now, most of them, you can't go in and promote yourself as a speaker. You just go in and speak 10, 15 minutes, some maybe up to a half hour on your topic. But let's face it, you sit down, you might have lunch, it might be over breakfast, might just be over coffee, and people ask you things, do you speak often? Where else could you speak? Could you speak at my organization or another one or my business? And things just start to snowball, if you will. They start to pick up speed.
mm-hmm,
And that's a pretty cool thing. Again, the more you speak, the more exposure you get, the more you'll speak in the future.
mm,
Speak, speak, speak.
mm-hmm. So, I mean, those are basic things, and then you don't make it any complex. And so, the person who's listening, if you can get something from Peter George, is speak, 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 get started, speak, get exposure, speak, keep
Yeah.
improving, speak, and the more you speak, the more you speak.
Yeah. And quite often, Anthony, you don't know who your friends or business colleagues know.
Mm-hmm.
And you can just say to them, hey, do you belong to, let's say it's a business organization you want to speak at? Do you
Mm,
belong to a business organization? Do you sit on a board anywhere
mm-hmm.
of an association, whatever it might be, nonprofit? Just start asking people and mentioning to them. The vast majority of the time, they're going to say, no, I'm sorry. I wish I could help you. Can't. But sometimes you'll have people say, yes, and we're always looking for speakers. We'd love to have you come in.
Mm-hmm. Now, if I may ask, uh, through these over 3 decades of speaking, what could be your greatest speech that you can remember, or greatest event that you've been a part of that you remember?
Oh, there's so many of them. But you know what's funny, Anthony, is one of my favorite ones. 2 people showed up.
Yeah,
And yeah, I'll back up a little bit here.
yeah.
I learned more about business from my father than anybody else. My dad died when I was 30, so it's not like we got decades and decades together, especially as adults.
Hmm.
But my father taught me an awful lot about business. And the
Okay.
funny thing is, my father was a firefighter. He was not a business person,
Ah,
but
interesting.
he would teach me about life and show me how I could apply it to business.
Yeah.
And one time I spoke, and there was supposed to be, it wasn't a huge gathering, 150, 200 people,
Okay.
and not as many people as they had expected showed up.
Hmm.
Maybe 30 people showed up, and I was kind of disappointed. And I told my father about this when I went home and visited my parents. And I was telling him, and he said, as a firefighter, when the alarm goes off, we never ask how many people we might save. We just go do our job. And that taught me about it doesn't matter how many people show up. And
Yeah.
it was a good thing I learned that lesson because I spoke in Minnesota. And then for those of you who aren't familiar with Minnesota in the US, Minnesota is one of the coldest states.
Mm.
It snows all winter long.
Hmm.
And there was a blizzard, and it
Hmm.
was supposed to be a business conference. No one showed up to the conference in general, but 2 hardy souls who were already in the hotel
Yeah.
came down for my talk. Now everything had been canceled, but I went
Hmm.
down there anyway. I had to wait a couple of days before I could fly home, so I just went down to the ballroom, the function room in the hotel, and sure enough, 2 people showed up. So I did my talk. There was only 2 of them, but I did my talk because of the lesson I had learned from my father.
Hmm.
Doesn't make a difference how many people show up. You do your job and do
Hmm.
it well. And so that was one of my favorites of all time. 2 people in a
Interesting.
blizzard, and we had a great time. I
Wow.
altered what I would do up on stage. I came off stage and got down on the floor with them, and it was pretty cool. That was one of my favorites.
Wow, interesting to hear that. Because I have a similar experience, and this one is not even on a speaking stage, but it's uh, practice sessions that we have with our people. You've been there, you know
Yes.
this. So, in the practice sessions that we have with our people, sometimes we have a crowd of 20, and then I've found myself as the one who's leading, and another person shows up, just one person, and we end up having the best of times in the practice session. So I
Yeah.
get it when you say that.
So that one stuck out, and it stuck out in a great way. I've had crowds in the thousands, and that was fantastic. The energy is amazing,
Mm-hmm.
but I'll never forget those 2 people.
Interesting. So I'll always be looking. I mean, that's an inspiration now when in our journey, when we get to a venue and we don't see hundreds or even thousands that we could have been expecting, to still go ahead and give what you came with.
Well, they don't care that they're the only ones that showed up.
Uh-huh.
They showed up. They want what they came for,
Oh,
and
you're the
you
one who
owe it.
is caring. You are
Yep.
the one who is caring. Oh, these people, it's only two people showed up. That's good. And um, I know, and you talk about snowballing, and I've had some testimonies of people who say that these two people snowballed into big crowds. Did that happen in that, or has it happened in another one that you can recall and you just say, oh, that was it?
It didn't happen in that one, but what's funny is there's always the discussion of, should I speak at no charge,
Mm-hmm.
no fee?
Mm-hmm.
And you hear people go back and forth. Some people say, "Don't ever speak for free," or. I don't agree with that.
Mm-hmm.
I pick and choose depending on the particular event, whether I'm going to get my regular fee, an adjusted fee with other things along with it that make up the difference in value, or sometimes I'll speak at no charge. And I'll give you an example
Mm-hmm.
where things would perpetuate themselves. I had the opportunity a bunch of years ago to speak at an event, and when they asked me, I was like, I would love to speak at this event. And when then we got to what will this cost? And they said, we're a nonprofit. We can't pay you.
Mm.
And however, the head of the nonprofit drives a much nicer car than I do. So someone's getting paid somewhere. But anyway, they use that line a lot. We're nonprofit. We can't pay you. But they were putting me in front of
Mm-hmm.
a tremendous audience that is my audience for training.
Mm-hmm.
And so I spoke for, I think it was 45 minutes, half hour, 45 minutes. And within the next 3 days, I had 2 clients from that talk. And
Mm.
I said, if I get 1, it'll be fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
Well, 2 was much more money than I would have charged to speak there.
Mm.
And a year later, they asked me if I would do the same thing. And I said, you bet. And they got more people there. And I got, I think it was 5, it might have been 6
Okay.
clients from that talk.
Mm-hmm.
So that the only problem was I asked them if I could start speaking there twice a year, but they only let me speak once a year because I knew I would get clients. And every time I speak there, I walk away within a few days, definitely within a week, with
Yes.
clients.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't charge for that talk, but it's extremely profitable. So
Mm.
that in its own way kind of snowballs and perpetuates more clients as time goes on. And of course, those clients tell other people. And, so for speaking for free in that particular instance, I've done fairly well from it,
Mm.
income wise.
Good report. Good report there. And you mentioned about where people are not maybe willing to pay your regular fee. Now, are you comfortable talking about fees? What's your fee? What's your regular fee?
Depending on the situation, it will range generally between $5,000 and $10,000.
Wow. Per speech.
Yes,
30 minutes keynote, or maybe
doesn't
35,
make a
one
difference.
hour, doesn't make a difference. So it's an appearance. Give me 10 grand on the table.
Yeah, and again, maybe different from some people.
Yeah.
I love to train as well as speak. So
Okay.
I have no problem, let's say at a conference, if I'm speaking and say, I'll happily also do a breakout
Mm-hmm.
at no extra charge. I'm there. So I'm more charging by my time, not just getting up on stage and speaking, not that time. I don't care if it's 45 minutes or 90 minutes. I'm still going to charge the same thing.
Okay.
But I'll also throw in other things. I want to be of as much value to that event and those people who attend that event as I possibly can be,
Mm-hmm.
because that's what gets me invited to other events as well as being invited back to that event.
Mm.
So I look at it as overall revenue, not just that particular time's revenue.
Mm.
What's the life of that, the life value of that event to me?
Yeah, you get value in appearing to that event. So, depending on the value that you perceive that event is gonna have, that's gonna determine what fee you're gonna ask for and what offer you could accept from them.
I'm going to pat myself on the back a little bit here.
Yeah, I do.
Um, I this goes back to my father too, my dad,
Okay.
as far as
You had a wonderful dad. You had a
you do what needs to be done. I
okay.
spoke in Alabama. This goes back many, many years.
Yeah.
And we spoke at at a facility that they had an agreement, the organization, that they would have someone come in and clean that facility. So the next morning, whoever owned that facility would be very happy that it was nice and clean and not a mess.
Mm-hmm.
The people who were supposed to clean it after the event never showed up.
Mm.
So the president of the organization and two other people
Mm-hmm.
picked up brooms and started cleaning.
Wow.
And which left me, and my wife was with me, the two of us just sitting there kind of watching other people clean.
Okay.
So my wife and I got up and started helping them clean too.
Yeah.
And they said, no, 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 sit down. You're the guest. You're not supposed to be doing this. Well, I had to wait for the president. He was our ride back to the hotel.
Mm-hmm.
So we got up and cleaned as well. And I've joked ever since then, I'll do a keynote, I'll do a breakout, I'll help you sweep. I will do anything that's necessary to make that that event a success.
Wow. Wow. That's a good one. Now, and it's good you share this. I've had some experienced people say, and this is a bureau manager, someone who hires the speakers to speak, and she usually says that I'll hire a speaker for being good to work with, not necessarily what they are going to speak on. But I guess you agree that yes, it matters what you're going to speak on, but then be good.
It's just like anything else in life. You can
Yeah.
either be a jerk to work with or someone who's good to work with.
Mm.
It doesn't take any more energy to be someone good to work with.
Wow. Doesn't take more energy to be someone good to work with. That's a good one.
If
Good
I ever
one.
got really cocky and full of myself, my father would come up out of his grave and smack me.
So good. Now, earlier on, you spoke about when I asked about your inspirations, those people who've given you an inspiration, desire, motivation to be a speaker, and you used to watch them and pick a few things here and there. Maybe there is someone who doesn't have the experience of speaking and could watch you or any other person and what do I watch for? What do I learn as I'm learning on my own? What do I learn even before I get a coach?
You know, with things like YouTube and the like, there are some great opportunities to see people speak, and just go in YouTube and start searching professional speaker, or if you know their name, search them and watch them speak and start pulling things out that resonate with you. And the thing is, you have to try to figure out why they resonate.
Mm,
And that's the difficult part of why did that make a difference to me, or why did it make a difference to the audience? It's not always what we think it is. It might not be on face value. It
mm,
might be coupled with something they did a half hour earlier. So start really studying about what's happening and figure out why it's happening.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why a coach, and I'm not trying to sell my particular services, but working with anybody in Toastmasters and other organizations that can help you become a better speaker, you get feedback.
Mm-hmm.
And that feedback makes the learning curve so much shorter and so much sharper.
Mm-hmm.
And you get to know more and get better at it sooner. And it's a lot less frustrating. So when you get people who know what they're doing to help you figure it out and help you do whatever that is well, then you'll be very, very happy with it. You'll know that what you're doing is right and will
Mm-hmm.
work for you. And what works for you, Anthony, might not work for me.
Yeah, yes.
You know, because personalities make a difference. I have
Sure.
a very warped, very dry sense of humor. So, and that might work with a particular audience, and I might research my audience and say, yeah, this is not the audience for my sense of humor.
Mhm.
I'll have a little humor in there,
Yeah.
but you know, I'm not going to put a lot in because it's just not the right audience.
Yeah.
But for you, it might be the perfect audience
Mhm.
for your particular personality.
And I agree with you. All of us are different. And so when we are approaching an audience, we could see whether we are going to bond with this kind of audience, because also the audiences are different. Are different. We have corporate audiences, we have schools. Now, speaking of audiences, and this is maybe what we call niching down. How do we niche down? How do we find the right kind of audience that I'm going to speak to?
Well, you know, when we speak, we have to think about what the benefit is for that audience.
Hmm.
And if you can serve that audience, and as speakers, that's what we are, we're servants.
Yeah.
And if we can serve that audience extremely well, then that's where you want to be. Now, could you speak to other types of audiences? Maybe. But if you can't serve them as well and help them as much, then niche down to that particular audience that you can serve so well. There can be a couple of different types of audience, target audiences, as far as the business nomenclature would go. But you can't say I speak on anything to anyone who will listen,
Hmm.
because you're not providing value at that point.
Mm.
I speak to certain niches. Can I speak to other ones? Sure. Will I speak to other ones? Yeah, if I can serve them well, but I won't actively pursue them because that's more work for me. In a particular niche where I'm known to serve that niche well, it's not as much work for me to get business.
Mm. Mm. Yeah, we get that. We get that. Now, uh, going back to your dry sense of humor, maybe you can tell us which has been your, or which did you ever have a worst experience in your speaking? Which was it?
Have I had a worse experience?
Yes.
On any
What
given
has
day,
been the worst?
on any given day, depending on how I remember it, one might be the worst, but I've had a lot of bad ones. And it's funny, earlier today, I was having a conversation with someone who just started speaking, and
Okay.
she said she didn't do as well as she had expected. And I said, remember this, as she spoke the other day. I said, remember that day, because 10 years from now, 20 years from now, that will be one of your best stories.
Mm.
When something goes wrong, and in 37 years of speaking, Anthony, if you can name it, it's happened to me. And anybody else who's been speaking long enough
Okay.
thinks that I spoke in London for 90 minutes in a beautiful navy blue suit and a crisp white shirt and had my zipper down the whole time. So the tail of the shirt was every time the zipper, the fly would gape open in a spotlight, no less, with an almost black suit that would just shine. 90 minutes, never knew it. I died 1,000 deaths when they told me afterwards that my zipper was down the whole time. Now it's one of my favorite stories. No one wants to hear, hey, Anthony, let me tell you the day it went perfectly well.
Yeah.
That's as boring as could be. But I can tell you about my zipper being down 90 minutes. I can tell you about when I got up to do a keynote, 2 fire alarms went off in the hotel. 700 people, filing out, filing back in. The alarm went off a second time, filed out, filed back in. By the time we were all settled, I had 8 minutes to talk. And I had to think, do I say nothing? Just, oh, well, I didn't get my time, or do I come up with something? And what I came up with was, had you heard me speak, this is what you would have taken away. So they still got the takeaway.
Yeah.
They didn't get the stories that would help them remember it. They didn't get my whole presentation, but they did get the takeaway. So at first I look at that as, woe is me. Why does this happen to me? You know, and one of my favorite stories now about how that turned out. And people came up to me in the lobby and at the restaurant and at the bar and all that for the rest of the conference, asking me questions. And so it worked out extremely well. I told a joke once, and I always say never tell jokes because most of us aren't very good at them. And I'm okay at telling jokes, but it wasn't an off-color joke by any stretch. It was not a sexual joke or anything like that. It was just the wrong joke for that location at that time.
Yeah.
And again, I generally don't tell jokes. I have humor, but I don't tell jokes.
Okay.
Well, I decided to tell this joke in front of just shy of 1,000 people that should not have been told. And I had an hour to speak, and it took 2 minutes to tell the joke at the very beginning. Anthony, sometimes you tell a bad joke or try to be humorous and you hear kind of a groan or a moan, and you know it wasn't a good idea.
Yeah.
There wasn't even that. No one said anything. No one did it. It was that bad a situation. And all I could think of was, well, I've got 58 minutes to make this better. And it ended very well. But so I look back wishing I had never done it. And it's against everything I train my clients to do, not tell a joke. I did it for whatever reason, whatever possessed me as I was walking out on stage. It's one of my favorite stories now. I wish I hadn't done it, but
it happened.
Now it's one of my stories.
Wow. Now, talking of picking the beats, turning an awful story into the most beautiful story. I believe that each and every of our listeners have been through some incidences in life, some experiences that could turn out to be some ideas to use in your next speaking career. Let me ask, how did you, now this speech, if you are to give a speech at this incident, you would pick from those stories. But basically, what's the general idea of getting speaking topics, speaking ideas? What's the general way?
The first thing you want to do when you get a speaking gig is to research the audience. Nothing good can happen for the most part. You could be very fortunate and have great things happen, but for the most part, they won't until you research the audience. If you just go out and speak about what you want to speak about, what are the odds it's going to resonate with the listeners? And the only reason you're there is to serve those listeners. So you have to research the audience. Why are they there? What do they want to get out of this? How are you going to transform them, make a difference in their lives, whether it's their business lives, their community activity lives, their home lives? How are you going to make a difference in their lives? So once you start doing that, things start to fill in. What stories apply to this? What anecdotes? How long do I have to talk? How am I going to engage them? So those things start to answer themselves, but many of us don't research our audience. And then we sit there and go, oh my God, what am I going to say? How am I going to open this? How am I going to close it? What stories am I going to tell? And they all the way to the point of getting on stage or in the front of a room or whatever it might be, still wondering that as we open our mouths to start to speak of, is this going to work? When you research that audience, you know, for as much of 100% as you can get, that this is going to work because you did your work. You did your research. You built the foundation to build everything else upon.
Mm-hmm.
If you try to build it without a foundation, it generally isn't going to work, at least not through the whole talk.
Mm.
So build
And
that foundation of research and then rehearse, 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 rehearse. And we could go on with the word rehearse
rehearse,
for the next hour.
rehearse.
Rehearse. Things will go not as you planned, no matter how much you rehearse. It could be an external force, fire alarms going off. It could be something your brain did to you. Hey, tell this joke when you shouldn't. Things can still go wrong, even though you rehearse, but you can rebound better if you're rehearsed. And if you don't rehearse, then you pretty much deserve everything that goes wrong.
You deserve everything that goes wrong if you don't rehearse.
Well, think about it.
Yeah.
I have all these people coming to hear me, and they're not coming because it's me. They're coming
Yes.
because I can provide something for them to take away.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're taking their time, sometimes their money,
Mm-hmm.
and their effort to be there. Yet I didn't take time to research them. I didn't take time to rehearse. Well, that's disrespectful.
Wow. Disrespect.
So respect your audiences.
Respect your audiences. So wow, you've got so much to share, and I love that, and I am sure that the one who's listening is gaining much insight from what you're sharing. But unfortunately, our time is up. So I just wish we had other day. But then I know people can follow up with you and get connected with you and gather much more from you. Please wind it up.
All right. They can follow me or connect with me and learn about my services, my book, The Captivating Public Speaker, all at Peter George, PeterGeorge, Peter George, publicspeaking.com.
Oh, wonderful. That's Peter George, publicspeaking.com.
That's it.
Yeah, so for everyone who's listening, watching, that's where you go. Peter George, publicspeaking.com. Get to find out more about Peter George, and also, yeah, get the book. Yeah, he has a beautiful book out there at the back. You can see it, but let me make it bigger. The Captivating Public Speaker: Engage, Impact, and Inspire Your Audience Every Time by Peter George. Forward by Dr. Ivan Misner. Who is he?
If you've ever heard of the organization called BNI,
BNI?
it's a worldwide business networking organization.
Okay.
He's the gentleman who founded that.
Okay. Well, someone ought to have heard about him anyway, who's listening or watching. And it's a good thing to go and get that book and find out more, connect with George, and get all the insight that he is sharing and much more. From his experience, you need to connect with people who know it, who've been there and done it, because they can show you how to go there and do it as well. Thank you very much, George, Peter George, for coming to our show.
Anthony, thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
Give us a parting shot, and then we'll end the episode.
Always remember, it's not about us as speakers. It's always, always, always about the audience.
Always about the audience. So says Peter George, and thank you very much. That's about it here at Diary of a Speaker podcast. We really appreciate Peter George coming, and we also appreciate you for listening or watching. Thank you very much for being with us. Keep on speaking, but before you speak, rehearse, then expose, and let's continue to engage, impact, and inspire our audience every single time. Bye for now. Bye.